thank you everybody for being here. I know it's 4 o'clock. Holly and I were actually looking at all the responses from the invitation, and I'd say there was probably 50 that people actually had comments. 48 of them were traffic related. One was, I work still, I can't retire yet. And the last one was, are y'all serving booze? So all room for improvement next year. So thank you all for coming. We truly are lucky to have you all as clients and friends of ours in many capacities. We're also very lucky to have an incredible team. So Holly and I were talking the other day about just the depth of our team and how we've grown over the years. And I know that a number of y'all work with a number of us. And so I think it's helpful to introduce each other one by one. So starting at the end, and not as the caboose, but as the train engine, Ryan Ely, an advisor, Tom Moore, you can wave your hand, Kurt Klein, my smarter but not as good-looking brother, Matt Reiner, Brian Ray, James Lewis, Eddie Gepp, can't see, Mallory Hesketh, who runs our marketing, Barbara, who's the beautiful receptionist that we all know downstairs, Tori, who works with James, Matt, and my father, who I'll give you his words of being absent later, Kelly Carter, who works with Kurt, Tom, and Ryan Ely, the engine, and Amanda, who works with myself, Wes, and Brian Ray, and Holly, who works with everybody. Holly is our operations manager in the Queen Bee, who honestly runs our entire firm. So I am Mitch Reiner. I did not introduce myself. I'm a partner and chief operating officer of the firm, and again, my father is a founding partner of the firm. He spends a decent amount of time at our Florida office, and he sends his regrets for not being able to be here today, but you at least get the rest of us. So again, we feel very lucky for having you all as clients. We truly do. We think that our clients are, I was just talking with Mark and Bob a minute ago about the fact that our clients are really millionaire next door folks. Our clients are really relatable people. Our clients are just nice people. And I just get that every single time that we have events like this. And I think that was the inspiration behind the book that Wes and I know Ryan contributed heavily to, and the rest of our team obviously did as well. But, the inspiration was, what does it take to retire sooner than you think? And the whole concept came from, what is it about our clients that make them very similar and bind them together? And it was the fact that they're just happy people, and they're enjoying retirement in ways that most other people are not. And can we characterize those statistics or those characteristics of those folks and tell everybody else about that? And I think Wes did an incredible job with the team developing that book. And so in speaking about lucky for you all, having you all as clients and friends, having an incredible team, being lucky with that, I am personally lucky to have a partner like Wes Moss with our firm, and I'll introduce the man that way. So Wes Moss.
Mitchell, thank you. Thank you. All right, can you guys hear me? Yes, we can. It's funny, as Mitchell was talking about how great the audience is here and how great our clients are and how nice everybody is. We've got a couple guys over here that say, God, this guy is full of it. When it comes, it's one of our clients and he knows us. So thanks for being here today. And I'm excited about the book and about being able to talk about the book and share everything that I think that I learned and share what I think I've learned from the audience here and that made it into this book. And there are actually a couple stories of people that are probably in this audience that made it into this book. I changed the names, by the way. So I changed the names once and then I changed them again. In the third revision, I changed them a third time. So I changed the names multiple times so you cannot tell who, you have no idea what your name would be and who you are if you're actually in the book. So with that, okay, so let me get a gauge of the audience here. How many people have already heard about the book or have the book? Okay, that's pretty good. That's a lot of people. How many people, and the rest of the people do not, we have books here, and they're obviously free, or we're giving them away. So if you don't have one, you can have one after today as you walk out. And then how many people listen to Money Matters, by the way? Wow, okay. And how many, so number one question I've gotten today already. So market was down, 275 points yesterday. That was number two. And a lot of worries about, hey, what's going on? The market actually went down, which for the first time in a long time, and that's a little nerve-wracking to people, right? Anybody nervous? See, what a happy group of retirees. No one's nervous, good. But the number one question I've gotten today is about my varicose vein commercials on WSB radio, which I got tricked into doing. I'm not kidding. So for those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, how many people have heard look at that. More people that have read the damn book. So I'm just going to get it out of the way and tell you what happened. I got tricked into this by Belinda. So I have had this all my life. I've had it's not a real medical issue. It's honestly more of a cosmetic issue. When I was like 18, I've had varicose veins in my right leg. Left leg totally normal. Right leg, I'm 18. I could have been 65. And it was just a little too quick in aging for me. So I originally got it taken care of when I was a teenager. Back when it was, they didn't even know what they were doing. It wasn't a real pleasant experience. And then they came back, 10 years later, and I had it done again. And then about a year ago, I was talking to Belinda Skelton at WSB. You guys know Belinda if you know WSB. And she does these commercials for Vein Innovations. And she loves these people so much. She's like, you've got to go see Vein Innovations. And so I did, and I actually have worked with them now for about 6 months or a year, and it's going really well. And the technology today that deals with the issue it's a completely different technology today than it was 25 years ago. So it's actually it's not a big deal. It's not that invasive, and it takes care of the problem. It really does. So they are so excited that I'm a guy that did this, and they're thinking that 95% of their clients are women, yet it's the same amount of guys that have varicose veins as girls. They're thinking there's a huge market here. So the marketing lady called me, and they're like, Wes, is there any way you can come on Belinda's show and talk about So I'm going way too in-depth about veins here. But I ended up doing a quick interview with Belinda, and they turned it into a commercial on WSB. And I was thinking, this is going to be great endorsement money, or maybe a free vein operation. And they called me today, and they wanted to bring me by a fruit basket and thank me. I was like, well, I was thinking I was getting like an endorsement check every time this plays. I'm going to get like a box of cookies. So anyway, there's nothing to do with what we're talking about today, but I just want to clear the air because I've gotten that question a lot. So let's go back. Let's talk about money and retirement, money and happiness, and all the things that went into this. This is a project. This is a research. And by the way, I apologize for this room. This is perhaps the worst room for a presentation I've ever been in. I mean, we might as well have 100. This is supposed to sit 300 people. We have 150 chairs that way and 100 that way, and it might be better than this. So I know this isn't a great arrangement, but stick with me here, and that's why we have two screens. So number one, a long time ago, the book business, by the way, is a difficult business, and it's so much work, even to produce any sort of book, that you've got, in my opinion, you really have to be ready to it's almost take on the project. Because if you don't take on the project and commit your entire life to it, or everything to it, if you come up with a book that's even slightly mediocre, it's going to be really difficult for people to care about it. You're not going to sell it. It's just almost a big waste of time. And I know that because I wrote a book 6-7 years ago called Make More, Worry Less. It was released during the height of the financial crisis. So it came out right. It was actually October November of 2007, right as the world was starting to completely fall apart. So Lehman Brothers about to go out of business, Bear Stearns go out of business, the stock market's crashing. Nouriel Roubini, who's a PhD, widely known economic forecaster, I remember him on CNBC one morning say that all the banks in America are underwater. So all the banks in America potentially could be going out of business over the next 6 months. Do you remember that time? Do you remember how scary that was? So this was so wonderful in my timing. I released a book during that period of time called Make More, Worry Less. Exactly when we're all making less and worrying a whole lot more is what happened. And it was just, it got zero attention. So nobody wanted to hear about it. It was a disaster. Nobody bought it. We sold, let's say, a couple hundred copies. So I vowed never to spend that much time again to do a book, because you can't control what happens in the media and the news cycle when you're about to release a book. So I didn't want to do anything until I had something brand new and something different. And I've always been a fan of the book, The Millionaire Next Door. And it's very difficult, if you can imagine, to write a new financial book about investments that is something that somebody hasn't written about before. So how do you do an original idea or original topic for something where there's probably 5,000 books already published? So I didn't want to do anything until I came up with something I thought was new and unique. And so I'm sitting there thinking, one morning where I think I'm brushing my teeth or shaving, and it's pretty much every idea I've ever had comes during that 3-minute window. Is that the same as for every guy, by the way? You get all your ideas in about a 2-minute block. The girls are like, yeah, they're about 2 minutes worth of thinking throughout the day. But I get that when I'm brushing my teeth or shaving, and I had this idea, and I have 3 kids. I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, 3 boys. And so I'm still in this, go back a couple years, we're having our 3rd. I'm in very much this, how do you raise children that sleep through the night and they don't ruin your life, and how does that happen? And there's a really popular book called Happiest Baby on the Block. And it's all about, how do you make it so that your kids are livable and they're good children and they don't ruin your life? Well, the same thought, in going back to what Mitchell was saying, is that I keep thinking about the group of people we work with. And in my opinion, it's a very happy, content, happy, whatever you want to call it, a group of people that are enjoying what they have. It may not be people that have $50 million or the richest people in the world, but people that have enough money that they've been able to stop working when they wanted to stop working, or maybe retire a little bit early, and then they're really busy and having this, what I would consider a really fruitful, fun retirement. And being in my later 30s now, it's the kind of thing that I hope to be able to do, or be in a position to do, just like a lot of people we work with. So my idea was, why don't I write a book called Happiest Retiree on the Block? Just going with that same theme. And that's the concept I ran with. And I thought, beyond me just coming up with what I think are happiness traits, and what I've learned from our client base and being in this business for about 17 years now, I'm going to go out and do a survey and try to do an objective, unbiased survey. So I created this survey of 36 different financial questions, life questions, behavioral, consumer, what people do with their money, the monetary levels people get to. And I was able to go out and get responses, full completed surveys, full responses from 1,350 individuals across 46 different states. And the data that came back to me after already writing a big proposal for this book about what I thought were happy retirees, the data came back to me, again, these aren't my answers, these are from a survey, were more interesting than what I had originally thought of on my own. So the book then took on a new life form. So it went from my ideas and what I thought I've learned to what people all across the country, families all across the country, were able to tell me. And that's when the light bulb went off here, is that this is really something pretty different. What you're going to learn in this book, if you haven't already read it, this is a unique take on money and happiness. Now I go back to that relationship about money and happiness, and I think to myself, I keep there's a memento box. I have a little box that I have on my desk or right above where I keep my socks, right, in the morning. And I have in there every day, I put my watch in there, so I have my watch and my wedding ring, and I've got the first Father's Day card I ever got from my 1-year-old and my wife when I had my first child. So it's kind of that little memento. How many guys have the memento boxes? Only a few people are manly enough to admit that. But I also keep, and this is I guess been almost 8 years now, I keep a movie ticket stub in that memento box. Does anybody know what that is, what the movie ticket is? Did you read the book? Okay, you can't answer. And here's what this, so nobody knows what it is, right? Does anybody, only a few people know what movie it is? I don't even know why I wrote the intro, because I wrote about this whole little story in the intro of the book, and it's the best part of the book, and obviously no one's ever read it. So that's okay. And I'm glad, because I'm telling the story today. There's a movie starring Will Smith, The Pursuit of Happiness, back in 2007. And this was right as I guess I was having my first child. So the story, if you have it, how many people have seen the movie, by the way? It's a good movie. It's a really kind of a powerful movie, especially if you're in the financial business, because the story is about a guy named Chris Gardner who was in medical sales. So he sold this medical device. I don't know exactly what it was in the movie, but it was effectively this medical device that was going out of date. So he's selling this, and he's doing his job, but the company itself isn't keeping up with technology, so the company's going out of business. So he's selling it, and he's doing okay, but the company goes out of business, and he's no longer able to get a commission check. So he goes like 2 months without getting paid, even though he's doing a good job. So he's a single dad. And he's got a 5-year-old son, and he's a single dad, and he's trying hard, and he's trying to make his way in San Francisco, and he ends up not being able to pay his rent because he's not getting paid. And effectively, this story, I think this is what I think will hit home for pretty much anybody in this room at some point in your life, had this fear about not having money or running out of money, and that's what happened to Chris Gardner. So he ran out of money, and he ended up homeless. He ended up homeless in San Francisco with a kid. In this movie, they're in a bathroom. He's in a subway bathroom with his son, holding the door shut with his feet so that nobody comes in, so he could spend the night with his child in the bathroom in the subway. And I think I go back to the thought, and I would say that most people here in this room at some point, maybe it's all the way back in your 20s when you first got out of college and you first started working, but you think to yourself, well, what if I just don't have any money? Or what if I don't get paid? Or what if I don't have a reserve and I'm not working for a month or 2 or 3? How do I pay for everything? And if you don't have a family support system, if you don't have parents or siblings, what do? The answer is you end up like Chris Gardner. You end up, there's a very fine line about being successful in America and then the next day not being able to pay the rent and you're out on the street. So there's a fear that we've all had at some point about not having enough money. And I think for me, that's what hits home more. It's not necessarily that money buys happiness. It's the fear of not having money that's very, very impactful, and it's scary. So the theme throughout this book here is about what are these financial, and I'm going to get to these financial levels. What are the financial levels we need to get to have a level of comfort? And it's not necessarily that money's buying you lots of happiness. It's that money to a certain point gives you a peace of mind and comfort so that you can go do the things you want to do. So I ended up at some point in the process of this book, and this was probably this is about a 2-year process writing the book. I ended up changing the name to the book to "You Can Retire Sooner Than You Think." I also learned through all this data and through all this research, there's a real tie to the happier retirees, those that have these happiness traits that I'll talk about here in a minute, are also the group that has a higher propensity to be able to retire earlier. earlier than most people in America. And that's a relative number. So in America, you've heard these retirement statistics, and they may be hard to believe for a lot of people in this room because you're here and you have investments, but the retirement statistics are scary. You've heard this 75% of Americans that are age 61 or 2, retirement age, the precipice of retirement, have less than 31 grand total saved. I mean, that's almost 3/4 of America is in that position. So the stats are really dire in America. The question is, how do you to some extent escape that? How do you get to the point where you have financial freedom and you don't have to work? And that's what I answer here in the book, and that's what I'm going to go through a lot of those statistics today. So some of you are already retired here. Some of you are already happy, blissful retirees. I wrote about you in the book, and you don't even need any of this information. But what I've also noticed is that a lot of people that I've talked to have mentioned, or have, besides bringing up varicose veins, have brought up that they bought this book for their adult kids. And this is a really great present for somebody who's 50 or 45 or 35 for that matter. So I think that as great as this advice is, if you're 75 today, this is more of an enjoyment book. It's more entertaining. You've already probably done a lot of this stuff. Where it's really impactful is for your 30-year-old kids or your 35-year-old children. I think that's the group that this can really help. Here's the other thought about this data, because the data comes back, and I asked a lot of questions about, I wanted to know how much money you ended up saving, how much liquid money do you have, retirement money, what's the value of your house, do you have a mortgage, if you have a mortgage, how many years left to pay off the mortgage, where do you shop for clothes, where do you shop for groceries, what kind of car, list the 2 cars that you have in your driveway, just tell me what cars you own. I asked about how many kids you have, how many times a year you travel, how much you spend on your average trip. I had 36 questions, financial, life, behavioral. And the 18 traits that I list in the book are the 18 strongest of those questions. And some of the data came back so interesting, and there was such a stark correlation between happy and unhappy retirees that I needed to get an additional verification. So let me go back and tell you about this survey for a second. I asked, again, a lot of the questions I just mentioned, and then I also asked the respondents to rate themselves on a happiness continuum, scale 1 to 5. Scale 1 to 5. Happiest were the 5s, and the least happy people were the 1s. And then I was able to take the data and take the 1s and the 2s, the least happy group, and compare them, all the financial numbers and all their answers, to the top 2 quintiles, the happiest group. So I've got my happiest retirees on the block and the unhappiest retirees on the block. I originally wrote the book as H. Robs and U. Robs, and my publisher hated that and made me take it out. I still like that, H. Robs and U. Robs, but it's really happy retirees and unhappy retirees. And the data that came back, there's some pretty stark differences between the 2 groups. So I thought to myself, I probably need to go statistically try to understand this a little bit better and see how valid this data really is. So I went to Georgia Tech. Got a Georgia Tech man up here in the front, Neil Russo. Yep. I found the president of the math club at Georgia Tech. You already laugh about it because if you meet the math club at Georgia Tech, it's a wild group, first of all. No offense, Neil. It's a crazy group of people. And I found the president of the math club, and she did a full study on it. So it took her about a month. She took all my data. There are 56,000 points of data, by the way, in the 1,350 people, 36 different questions. There's a lot of data. It took a long time to really cull through the data and bring out what we thought was important for the book. And then she tested for confidence. So is it statistically significant, the difference between the 2 groups? And much of what I have in the book are the answers that came back that are the highest level of confidence. So 95 to 99% confidence for the financial levels that you'll see in this book, which gives me even more confidence that this book is not just a bunch of conjecture of what I made up or what I thought and I put into a book with a cool title. It's very much real data behind all this stuff that I did not make up, and some of it I wish I could have thought about it, but the data itself was probably more interesting than what I would have come up on my own. So this is how we ended up with this title. You can retire sooner than you think. the meat of the book here is really about the 5 money secrets of the happiest retirees that I hope that we can all learn a lot from it. If you've already read it, certainly your kids. Let's take a look at the next group of slides here. Let me go back one. It's already broken. I also host a technology show, by the way. Do you guys know about that? Did anybody watch that show? Like, everybody listens to WSB, nobody watches NBC, right? Did 3 people watch the technology show? The ratings are terrible. I get it. Let's see here. Here we go. So this is this is the first thing. This is the question, does money buy happiness? Does money buy happiness? And the answer I'm getting that I came back with is that it does buy happiness, but only to a point, and then it starts to level off. Princeton, and this is part of how this is part of me starting to think about this topic. About 5 years ago or 6 years ago, Dave Ramsey did a show I heard him talk about this study from Princeton, about how Princeton did a study that asked about income. It said, are you happy or you're not happy? And they determined that in order to be happy in America, you had to achieve or get to $75,000 in income. That was like this money happiness benchmark. And then, and that's always stuck in my head. And I thought to myself, well, why don't I try to take that study a lot further? And that's part of the idea of happiest retiree on the block. And I'm going to try to take this Princeton study a lot further than just, well, what's your income? Are you happy or not? So this is the relationship that I got back on a lot of my questions, meaning that when it comes to assets, there's a lot of initial happiness that we get, or let's call it utility of the money, enjoyment of the money, happiness, when we go from a little amount of savings to a fair amount, and then it starts to level off. Or if we go from a little amount of income to a significant level of income, and then it starts to plateau. That is the overall relationship that I've gotten just statistically about money, and it makes sense. Think about if I make $30,000 a year in America, in Atlanta, then and I'm just struggling to pay my rent or get by, and now I'm making $80,000 a year, I have a really big jump in cushion or happiness. So that's why the way this is graphed, you see this big spike in happiness in the initial stages of earning more money. Same thing when it comes to savings. I get a big jump in happiness if I go from no savings to $200,000 a year. Now I start to feel like I have a cushion. And that's what this relationship tells me here from the data, is that when it comes to money, there's an initial big jump in happiness, or maybe it's really just a cushion or security, this feeling of security in the early stages of saving or earning. Think about, though, if I'm making $1 million a year, and I can afford anything I want to do, and now I go to making $1.5 million a year. Now I'm making $500,000 more a year. Does that really change your life? Does it move the meter and your happiness? Can you go afford? Are you going to go now buy a G335 jet? What is it, G3? No, because they cost $200 million. So you're not going to change your lifestyle much, even though there's this jump. So I talk about this in the book, that there's diminishing marginal happiness as we continue to save more money. You get to a point, happiness levels off. So if I had to sum this question up, and this is the question I've gotten a lot in the media, is that money buy happiness? It does. Money does buy happiness, but only to a point, and then it starts to level off. There's something else I want to talk about here. So we've got the plateau effect. Let's just keep going here. This is what I'm talking about. Part of this fear, there's a fear that I learned after the book, and I've learned this only through talking to reporters about the book. And I'm lucky enough to get I've been interviewed a lot on this thing. Done a lot of radio, TV stuff, a lot of print articles about this. And what's interesting to me is that almost every reporter asks or makes a comment and says, Wes, you talk about getting to a certain level of income. And as you'll see here, kind of my bare minimum benchmark for retirees is $500,000. That seems like that's a low amount. That's not a lot of money. Because I read articles, Wes, that say I need $1 million a year to retire. And that was 10 years ago. And then I've recently read an article that said $1 million isn't even close to enough to retire. You need $2 million. And what's kind of interesting to me, what I've learned is that most of Wall Street that controls the advertising that we see every day, Morgan Stanley, UBS, Merrill Lynch, I'd even put Fidelity and Schwab as to some extent culprits here, is that you remember the ING commercial where you carried around that orange number? You remember that? This one guy's carrying around $565,000, another guy's carrying around $1.45 million, and they're talking across the hedges about how much money, their number. The financial industry in general has no reason to ever tell you have enough, right? So their answer is more. How much do I need to retire? Let me do some calculations. More. When you think, I had a nice woman, I don't know if she's here today, but she come in a month ago, and she's 66. She has over $1 million. She has a pension. She has Social Security, and her house is paid off, and she really doesn't even need anything from her investment. So she's ready to go. She's ready to retire. Well, she had just come from another advisory firm that told her that she's 66, and I said, gosh, I think you can retire 3 years ago you could have retired, was what I was thinking. Well, she said that the advisor she had met with told her that she needed to work till she was 70 in order to assure that she never ran out of money. And my thought is that, well, I can tell you how to never run out of money, is just work until you die. And then you will likely never run out of money. Just keep working, die, and you never get mad at me. And if you think of it, if you're a financial advisor, that's a pretty safe bet, right? That's a safe bet. Just keep working. Just keep saving. And the other thought is that Wall Street, why do they have any incentive to ever tell you that you have enough? Well, these are publicly traded companies. Morgan Stanley is a publicly traded company that is doing everything they can to always have more under assets and more from clients every single quarter in perpetuity for the rest of the time they're alive. So why would they ever have a mantra that's, hey, I think you get to this level, you're probably in good shape? That's counter to their business model. So what's interesting, what I learned from doing so many interviews about this is that I think that is the perception for most people, maybe not in this room, but for most people in America, that it's not enough. You give me a time thing back there, Holly? You should just say, hallelujah. All right. How many people listen to Money Matters, by the way, on the way to church? Pretty much everybody. So when I drive in, by the way, to go to Money Matters, it's like 2 blocks from my house. So I drive in, it's like 8:30 on a Sunday morning. I see no one, and I get to the studio, and it's so quiet, and there's nobody around, and I feel like there's just nobody listening to that show. So God bless you for going to church and actually listening. So I go back to this concept that we don't think, that or Wall Street makes us think that we're just never going to have enough, and I don't think that that's true. So this is this plateau effect. A little bit of money goes a long way in the beginning, and then it's diminishing marginal effects or diminishing marginal happiness. Here are some of the more stark differences that I found through the research. Is that the number of core pursuits, I'm going to talk about in just a second. These are hobbies on steroids, very different between these two groups. The number of vacations you might like this one. The number of vacations, very different between the two groups. Time spent planning, kind of a boring one, but actually a really, really important one. Probably that most people in this room already know the answer here, but I have a number of time spent on this. Number of kids is different. Liquid net worth, there's an interesting disparity between the two. And then mortgage, time to pay off. Let's go to number 1. So this is the first, so I have effectively 5, there's 5 sections of this book, or 5 secrets in the book. The first one I originally thought is what do you do with the money? Like, why are we saving money to begin with? Well, we're doing it to stop working typically and then do all the other more fun stuff. Even if I like my job, I'm going to do more fun stuff that's not working. Or I just don't want to be beholden to working anymore. So I asked this question in the survey. I was really careful about this. I said, I want you to list, first of all, how many core hobbies or core pursuits do you have? And I describe core pursuits as hobbies on steroids. So I think about golfers in the room. There are a lot of golfers at CIA, and usually I would say I'm the only non-golfer. It's really just I'm the only bad golfer. So I just say I don't really play golf. But my partners that do, they don't just like it a little bit and they play once, every couple months. They love it, and they almost live by it, and they play pretty much any chance they can get. In fact, that's probably where Mike Reiner is right now, right? He's our CEO, by the way. He's not here. He's probably playing golf. But that's what I'm talking about, things that you really, really want to do in your life. And golf is just an example. It's not something that I do. I grew up in a family that my father didn't even like golf and thought it was a terrible waste of time and thought it was a terrible hobby. So that's why I never played. I've learned that I do have fun. I do still stink, though. But here's the thing, is that it doesn't matter what this is. It doesn't matter what these core hobbies are. It matters that you have them. And then I asked, well, what are your core hobbies? And I had people list these free form. And there's a really interesting, the disparity between the two groups of hobbies are pretty different. So for the unhappy group, number one hobby listed, and this is 1,300, over 1,000 people, the number one hobby in the unhappy group came back as reading. Okay, that's okay. And I see some readers in the room, that's fine. Number two, by the way, on the list, on the top 5 list, was hunting, by the way. So we're in Georgia, and I've gotten a couple calls on that one. And I've gotten some calls from people in Georgia. Wes, hey, I love your book, and we talk about it. It's really helped me. I can think of this doctor from South Georgia. He's talking to me about, I love the book. He's asked me questions. He goes, I got to be honest with you. I don't like your part about hobbies. He's like, I love to hunt and fish. And he's like, and I'm happy as hell. And so not all of these hobbies, you read the book, you're going to be maybe offended on some of them. And that's fine. But again, remember, I didn't make, these were not my ideas. This is just, I'm listed in the book what came back on this survey. So I think hunting's great. I think fishing's great. Just happened to be in this unhappy group as one of the top hobbies. The number one core pursuit for the happy group was volunteering. That was the number one thing that came back. And now that could be a conglomeration of, let's say, volunteering for a regular nonprofit, also volunteering for church. I think there's probably a big contingency that came through volunteering through church. So that's kind of interesting to me. And families is big on actually both lists. So everybody lists family as one of the core pursuits in their life, and that makes a lot of sense. And then the happy group also, if I combined all the different active pursuits, so hiking, biking, running, exercising, there was a really large contingency of active hobbies in the happy group. So pretty interesting data here. Let's keep going. And this is also part of travel was really high on the list in the happy group. You can make an argument that it's the happy group that can afford to travel, regardless of why you can or cannot. This is in the data: is that the happy group on average takes 2.4 vacations a year. Unhappy group takes 1.4. That's an entire vacation difference per year. And a pretty interesting thought here that is it the money that allows extra freedom, or is it the adventurous side of people that are always trying to travel and find new things? I don't know the answer to that, but it's a very telling statistic here that happy retirees report taking an entire extra vacation per year. Here's where the rubber meets the road on the statistics. And again, if you look at Amazon, I've got about 100 comments on Amazon about this book already, or reviews. The reviews that don't like the book, and there's a few of them, believe it or not. The reviews that don't like the book are people that think getting to $500,000 is unattainable, and it's only for the rich. The only way you can get to $500,000 is if you make hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. And I know this because I obsessively read my own reviews. Every single bad review is the complaint, is that this is unrealistic. I'm never going to be able to get to this number here. I'm never going to be able to get there. And I think for some, the other thought, and I even wrote this in the book, I didn't say that any of this was easy. This is not an easy thing. And that's why 3/4 of America has that less than $31,000. And that's just the reality of the world. So it's not my job here to say this is easy or hard. These are just the numbers of, I looked at this data, going back to the Georgia Tech way of looking at the data. I look at this as median, and I look at versus mean of the two groups, the happy group versus unhappy group. In the median, I wanted to find an inflection point. So I used this graph as the median. Where do we tip over to the happy group? The answer is 500,000. So there's a big continuum of liquid savings in my data. But if you look at it, what is the median tip over point between getting to this point where I can become one of these happy retirees? And the answer is $500,000. Is that 7 minutes or 25 minutes? 7, got it. So happiness, there is getting to that point of $500,000. So again, that's going to get adjusted for inflation over time, but that is reported by the happy retirees that are able to either stop work, or they're already stopped working. By the way, I should have said this in the beginning. The data set here is people that are in retirement or within 10 years of fully retiring. So it's basically, the average age in the survey is 61, but you can think of the data set as really 55 up. This is 55 and up. So happiness, getting to $500,000, if you have to say, it would have been nice, wouldn't it have been nice for your kids or you a long time ago to hear that bare minimum financial level you need to get to in savings, you got to get at least to $500,000. Number one, it's a goal, and you can get it's something to focus in on. Number two, it's not as scary of a number as you need to get to $2 million, like an article you might read on CNBC.com. It is actually, I think, an attainable number, and I know this for a fact that it is, because I work with plenty of people that go back that have earned in their life as a family less than $100,000 a year. So let's say $45,000 for husband and wife that still end up well above these numbers. So for the reviews I read on Amazon that say this is totally unattainable, I don't agree with that. I just don't agree with it. If you make minimum wage for the rest of your life and make $15,000 a year, right, this is not attainable. But for Americans that can get into that, about my data is income-wise, getting to about $85,000 or $90,000 as a family, household, these numbers are very attainable because I've seen it over and over and over again. One of my this is my favorite charts here. I asked, do you have a mortgage or not? So this is another chapter in the book, another secret in the book, which again, I know they're not secrets. That's publisher change that. They're just fundamental financial practices that we all have to do to retire early. There is a real correlation of not having a mortgage and a level of happiness. And it's so stark that you see levels of happiness rise as years to pay off mortgage go down. This, to me, was the most shocking piece of data that I got back. It's almost too perfect. You chart out these groups, and you get happier as your number of years go down to pay off the mortgage. It's great. It's because the light at the end of the tunnel to not having a mortgage, it gets brighter and brighter and brighter, and you get more and more excited that instead of paying $2,500 a month that goes to Wells Fargo, how much utility is in that after 15 or 20 years? It's the same. Wouldn't you rather have that be one extra vacation a year, or at least be part of paying for an extra vacation? So happy retirees, because they don't have a mortgage, or their mortgage is going to be gone at some point soon, it's that they have less financial pressure for their monthly budget, and then more of their money goes to the things they want to do. To me, that's just common sense, right? It's just kind of fundamental common sense. But you see this statistically, I think it's really powerful. Again, I went back to income. This is the income chart as well. And again, this is 95% confidence. Georgia Tech verified the least two happy groups and the top two happy groups. They average the happy two quintiles, the happy retiree group, about 82,000 a year. The group on the I guess your left side here, the unhappy group, it's closer to about $60,000 or $59,000 a year. So pretty important that we get to at least a certain level of income at some point. But this is another thing we don't talk about a whole lot in financial planning, or you may not hear a lot. We work for so many years at let's say a big company or our own business, and we get a kind of one big paycheck is what we're used to, or two big paychecks in the household. And then when that goes away, that's probably one of the most unnerving things that happen to retirees. It stops. And then you go from getting this big paycheck to having to get lots of little paychecks to make up for that. So would you rather get $6,000 a month in one check in retirement, or six $1,000 checks in retirement? Well, the answer is you'd rather get six $1,000 checks, because if something happens to that main primary income stream, if it goes away or gets diminished, you've got something to fall back on. So I think of these income streams as multiple tributaries adding into this one big stream of income. So I asked in the survey, how many different income sources do you have? Beyond the income, how many different ways do you get your income? This again is pretty telling to me. The average happy retiree has about 3 or a little over 3 income sources on average. The unhappy group has less than 2. It also means the unhappy group is relying more on Social Security, which is also that's scary in its own right. And for younger generations like Ian here, how old are you?
22.
22? Social Security probably won't even be here for Ian's generation. I don't know if it'll be here for my generation, and I'm not even 40 yet. So to rely on that and to rely strictly on the government is a pretty scary proposition. So this is number of income sources that I had list. So think about, I can get a Social Security for me and my wife. I could get a pension for me and my wife. I could get some sort of other government benefits. I could get rental income. I could get part-time work as another income stream. And that's actually kind of an interesting thing that I learned too, is that I had a lot of people list part-time work as something that they want to do or they enjoy doing. In Atlanta, I have a lot of people I've worked with that don't need to work, that still stay engaged doing something 2 or 3 days a week here in Atlanta, just so that they don't, usually so you don't drive your wife crazy or something like that. But I see some smiles on that one, some finger pointing. Jeff, do you drive her crazy? Is that what that is?
These two. No.
Yeah, these two. So this is kind of, again, I think it's common sense, but there's a lot of power in having a part-time job, financially and just staying busy in retirement. And that shows up in this part of the survey here. The last part of this, and I want to get to, we'll just do Q&A here for a little while after I'm done. But the last part of this is that, and this is where I guess my overlay of advice comes in for the most part, and what we do as a group at CIA. So if you're already a client at CIA, you probably know about this, but this is what's so interesting about investing over time, and for most investors in America, is that even though markets, and this goes back, and I've seen this chart recreated for the last 15 years. I've seen this chart get updated and updated and updated and updated. So I like this one the best because it doesn't count 2013, which was a huge year for the S&P 500. S&P 500 was up 31% in 2013. So take out that year and go back 20 years and go back 1993 to 2012, which is a full 20-year period of time. And if you'll see here in the blue, this is what the passive unmanaged index of each one of these asset classes did on average. This is an average annual return of each one. REITs, real estate investor trusts, up 11% on average. Gold up 8.5%. The market, S&P 500, average 8.2% per year. And this is not counting 2013, which was a huge year. Bonds up 6%, international up 6%, home inflation up 2.7%, regular inflation 2.7%, and the average investor in a balanced fund, and this is measured year after year after year by Dalbar, which is a mutual fund research company. So they actually can go into a mutual fund company and see what the experience has been of the actual investor. So a measure of what people really made in funds, not what the funds themselves did, but what investors actually experienced. And this is the average rate of return for investors. Less than inflation, so 2.3% is what most investors have experienced over time. So if somebody wants to argue with me about whether you pay off a mortgage or not, because I'm only paying 4% on my mortgage and I can make 8% in the stock market, I usually point to this chart and I say, well, is that really going to be the case? So I really believe in that part of the book. Pay off your mortgage if you can, because most investors aren't really even making that 4 or 5 or 6% that they're paying in mortgage, in the cost of interest for a mortgage. So this is a really telling chart. Now, this room, if you're a CIA client, this doesn't apply, obviously, right? So hopefully, if you're a CIA client, you've done a lot better than averaging 2.3% per year. But this is for the average retail investor who what will time in and out of mutual funds and time in and out of markets at the perfectly wrong time. And that's actually what happens for most people, not everyone. But the average American, that's the experience. They want to get into technology in 1999 when it's too late. They want to get into housing in America or in 2007. And those are always the very worst time. And they want to get, and you know this, because you remember this, 2009. You think about how scary it was in 2009. I remember hearing on the radio that there is no place to invest. I remember specifically, I'm not going to say the host. Couldn't have been on WSB, I can tell you that. No place to invest in January of 1999. I wouldn't be in the stock market. I wouldn't be in the bond market. I wouldn't be in real estate. And what has happened since that period of time? The S&P 500 is up over 200%. And nobody wanted to be in the market. And that's the reality of the world. Is that the scarier the market gets, the better your returns will be if you have the courage to go in or stay the course, which I know that a lot of the folks in this room did during that period of time. And now we're at the point where if you stuck even partially with the stock market, even if it's only been 30 or 40% of your portfolio, you're very, very glad that you did. But I'm not saying it was easy. It was very difficult to do. It took a lot of fortitude. It took a lot of stomach to be able to do that in a very, very scary period of time. So this is the average investor experience. It also relates back to what we do at CIA, which is income investing. And I don't need to do a commercial really for income investing here, because a lot of you in the room already know about it. But and I'll just briefly go over this. The reason that we think income investing works so well is that we're entering into, so we're investing, which is a very uncertain hobby or sport or profession. And we can't control the stock market. So there are only a few things that we can control as investors explicitly. And we can control our cost. We can control our cost. And we can control the amount of income a portfolio generates for us. Those are the two things that we can control almost to the penny. And when we're thinking about income, we know that if we're getting a dividend from a stock and interest from various kinds of bonds or distributions from energy companies or pipeline companies or real estate investment trusts, we know that those three areas add up very, very specifically to a cash flow. That at the beginning of the year, if you have a 3.5% or 4.5% yield, it's not going to change. It's not going to change as long as it's a diversified way of getting it. Could you have a company that cuts a dividend? Sure, but if you have it in enough areas, your income will stay very, very steady, regardless of what the stock market does. So we can't control the market being up 31% last year, or down 4.5% over the last 2 weeks. We can't control that, but we can control our income. So part of why I'm such a believer in income investing, it's not that it's necessarily been the very, very best overall rate of return over the last 25 years, but it's a way so that you don't end up here as an investor making only 2.3% because you're getting out when things are scary and you're getting back in at the wrong time. Income investing will allow you to participate and stay the course and experience something that's in between the stock market and the bond market. And if you did the math here, you'd average 7% a year. And that's 7% a year, you double your money every 10 years. The way the math works. It's a heck of a lot better than 2.3%. So that's why we're such believers in an income-oriented approach. It helps alleviate some of the really common mistakes that a lot of investors fall into. So that's the income investing side here. So I would contend that happier retirees love income investing, but I'm a little biased towards that. So, all right. So with that, I'd love to go. What are some other? Let me give you a couple follow-up stats here. I even asked about cars. I never even got into cars. I asked people, and again, if you've read the book, I don't want you to give it away. So, number of kids. Here's another tip. You're going to get a book. If you don't already have a book, you're going to get one. If you don't want to read the book, because you already heard me talk about it, if you go to page 235, it's the appendix. It has the 18 happiness traits right in there, and then the 18 unhappy traits. So you can just skip to 235 to age 241, and that's the meat of the book. I had it all in the first chapter, and my publisher was like, "You're giving it away too soon. Put it in the appendix." So I'm going to skip to some of this because I know that even some of my favorite books I don't fully read. So I'm a big Malcolm Gladwell fan, and I've read all his books. And then I got David and Goliath. Has anybody read David and Goliath, by the way? No. Well, never mind. See, nobody reads this guy's books. David and Goliath is his latest book, and it's a really cool concept of how the story of David, this supposedly little guy, defeats this giant. Obviously, we know the story, but it's the truth behind the story. It's the history behind the story, and if you really understand the real variables to that story, it's not as shocking or surprising because David had some real advantages, and the Goliath had some big disadvantages. It's a fascinating story of how he explains it. Well, then he relates the rest of the book to small business. So small business can compete against a huge business. You know, David and Goliath, you can still win against the Goliath. I got past the Goliath story and I was done, and that was like page 35. So that's why I'm saying if you don't want to read the full book, just skip to the appendix, page 235. Here's what you're going to learn. Happy retirees, more life hobbies. We talked about that. They take more vacations. They save more. They spend more. What do they drive? Happy retirees. What do they drive? What's Clark drive? That god awful looking Leaf, right? Who has a Leaf here? Does anybody have? Thank you. I wrote about it. I love the Leaf. I was trying to get one myself. They're free in Georgia. Pretty much. They're free, right? By the way, the Nissan Leaf is almost free in the state of Georgia. They'll give you $5,000 to buy it in a tax credit, a full tax credit, and it costs about $4,800 to lease it. So you actually make $200 and get a car for 2 years. And your gas bill will go away. But what do happy retirees drive? Happy retirees drive, the number one luxury car, I put all this in the book, they drive a Lexus, okay? What does an unhappy retiree drive? They drive BMW. I don't know why that's funny. That was in the book. BMW people hate me. In fact, BMW did a blog about this. BMW USA did a blog about this crazy guy in Georgia says that unhappy people drive BMWs. He's crazy. Actually, they didn't say that. They went through the research. They talked. They didn't make a judgment on it. They just said, "Hey, this is kind of interesting." And then the comments underneath that blog on BMW USA, those were a little harsher. So they were like, "This guy's an idiot." People that drive Lexuses are 1 foot out of one foot on a banana peel, the other foot on the grave. People that drive BMWs really know how to drive, and I have nothing to do. It was not my idea. Here's what, but it's fascinating to me. I got all this data. The car data came back. It took forever just to go through all of this, but it's not even that the happy. It's not so much that the unhappy or that the happy group drives BMW. Yes, number one luxury car on that list, BMW. It's that it was number. On the list of the happy retiree cars, the BMW was number 16 on the list. It almost didn't show up. So kind of, again, I never could have thought of that or made that up, and I don't even know the answer to the question. Why? And obviously, and here's the other thing. I know that it's not as you get a BMW, you're unhappy, and then if you can just buy a Lexus, you're happy. It's not the causation, right? It's an interesting correlation if you look into that. So does anybody have a BMW, by the way? No one would admit it. Okay, I'm sorry for you, sir. Obviously not a client of CIA, but thank you. Hopefully we can convert you, sell it on the way out. We'll get you a Lexus and you can come on in. So what else here? Happy retirees I even asked restaurants. Happy retirees they like to eat out. Longhorn was a top choice. For some reason, everybody likes the Olive Garden. Both happy and unhappy retirees. And I think it's funny just because it's so it's kind of interesting that now at I guess it's just free breadsticks is what it is. Free breadsticks and salad, right? Unlimited salad bowls. What else do we got here? So yeah, pay off your mortgage. Kids, this is interesting. I graph out kids, and I don't. The happy retirees actually have more kids. This is kind of an interesting thing to me. So the average happy retiree has 2.5 kids, 2.6 children to be exact, from my research. The unhappy retiree has a half a child from the research. But and it's funny because there are all these anecdotal things, all this. I mean, okay, obviously I don't need to bring in what kind of car you drive necessarily to a financial planning meeting. So it's not as though some of these are just more fun than they are heavy financial planning things that we need to abide by. But I have noticed in the last year and a half or 2 years now, there's a lot of times when you're trying to make a financial decision where it's almost like you need a tiebreaker, and you can make a good case like for a mortgage, good case to pay off a mortgage or not pay off a mortgage. You make a great case either way. What I've been able to really use this data for is financial tiebreakers. So I really like this data with that usage. And part of it is, the reason I bring this up, when it comes to kids, I've already got 3 kids. So Lynn and I are talking about like having a 4th child. Do we have a 4th? And when I got back this data, I was like, look, we've got 3 kids. We're diminishing marginal happiness if we tip over and have another child. I'm like, our happiness is going to go down. And we're still on number 3. So I'm like literally living by this data here.
That conversation go?
The conversation was not good. Anyway, all right. So there's some light part of the book. I got a little heavy there for a little while. Will Smith tried to make you cry. Some of these charts, but there's a lot of fun parts about this book, and that's what makes this, to some extent, it makes this a unique book, and it makes it different. And again, I don't need to sell it because I'm giving it away. But you're on the way out, I would love for you to pick up a copy, and if you already have it, give one away, or if you're and just enjoy. So thank you for sitting through this. And thank you for everything that you do as part of our community here. And that's it. That's it. Now, hold on though. Let's do some Q&A. Okay, so hopefully you'll have some questions here. What time is it? 5. That's an hour of talking. Go ahead. So I'm ready for any Q&A. Any questions? Yes, sir, in the orange.
You had your figures there of the $500 happiness level.
500,000, yeah. 500 bucks.
Yeah.
Happiness.
We're all happy, right? Is that per person, per household, or?
That's a first question I usually get. That's a good qualifier. Those are household numbers. And then part of getting to that point is the household income numbers as well. It is helpful, and this is part of the data I don't talk about a lot, or didn't talk about today, but let's face it, if you're married and you have two incomes, it's a lot easier to hit these numbers as well. Yes?
How did you pick the 1,350 people that you surveyed?
So I used SurveyMonkey is a Silicon Valley survey technology company. The guy who runs it is Sheryl Sandberg's husband. Sheryl Sandberg's the CFO of Facebook. So very legitimate company. SurveyMonkey has a database of I think they're up to 26 million people that are in the SurveyMonkey database that have signed up they've given their demographic information, and they don't pay them to do surveys, but they donate to a charity of your choice if you participate in a full survey. That's a key here too. 20 years ago, to be able to get this data that I did, and I think back about what Thomas Stanley did in the Millionaire Next Door, and he had I think he called it the Quantitative High Net Worth Research Lab. It probably took him 3 years or multiple years to get all the data he got from millionaires. With what technology can do today through a platform like SurveyMonkey that we did, and it took about a month, is really an incredible resource. So I wouldn't even be able to do this with this level of data even 5 years ago. So pretty interesting. So it's really just this gets sent out to thousands of people. The people that do full completions of a survey that are of a certain age and above, that's what built my reservoir of completed surveys, and then that's where the data came from. Yes, sir, in the upper left room. 3 rooms away, well laid out in our stadium. Holly's getting her exercise.
What is the average return on a CIA investment?
Ooh, that's what you want to know. This month or over the last 10 years?
Over the last few years.
Yeah, it's been a rough month. I would look at, and again, let me couch this by saying, and you already know this in this room, that every portfolio we have here is different. No 2 portfolios are the same. But I can tell you that as a firm overall, if you wanted to approximate our assets right now, we have approximately half of our assets in the equity side of the market, the stock side of the market, and the other half is what we consider in the income side of the market. A big chunk of that is the bond market. So let's call it 40% in various kinds of fixed income, individual bonds, ETFs that are bonds, bond funds, and then 10% on average what we consider alternative investments that are pipeline companies, pipeline energy storage companies. They're called MLPs. It's a big part of what we do as well. Oil and gas, energy royalty trust, real estate. We consider those as alternative income. So if you just take these areas here, S&P 500 and the Barclays Aggregate Bond Index, a lot of our portfolios look like a blend of that. So you could look at last year, S&P 500 up 31%. A half stock, half bond portfolio is probably up anywhere from 12 to 16%. Somewhere in that range for the average client. I see some heads nodding. Hopefully that's saying, yeah, that's about right. And this year, I'd say our accounts are probably up 3 to 5%, depending on what the allocation is. So that's what it looks like.
What is the average portfolio value?
So CIA, we have 2 different platforms. The average CIA, we really have 2 specific firms. We have CIA portfolios that are all 100% custom, and then we have portfolios we call Wella, which is our Wella strategies. Those are ETF only, and they're model portfolios. We have a dozen of them. Those are typically anywhere from $50,000 to usually around $500,000, and then our CIA clients are $500,000 and up. And our average CIA client nowadays is probably about $1.25 million to $1.5 million. And again, part of that is that it's been a great, if you think about it, it's been a really, really great 5-6 years in rebounding of the stock market too. And the bond market actually hasn't been bad either. So hopefully that answers the question. Yes?
We're all here because of the right reasons. Right? And what I run into more and more is the 25 to 35 year old. And responses are, we're never going to retire, because that's what's being set up for us. So what are you, and I even refer to the entire investment community, doing?
Yeah.
So number 1, reach out to that age group. Number 2, convince them there is light at the end of the tunnel, because we've been hit with a number of difficult news, from the government on high.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yeah.
And so they've got to this mindset that
It's kind of hopeless.
Yeah, kind of hopeless. And again, we work with our own children. We can try to guide them, but I may meet with a dozen of my children's friends. Okay. And
Yeah.
to a person, they're like, oh, we're waiting for the golden goose to land in our lap. Okay. Or we're going to go invent something, or we're being taught in college that don't get a real job. Go and create a Shark Tank business.
Yeah.
Truly, okay?
Yeah.
And so, I hope the investment community is not at the point of saying, if you don't come in with a certain amount, we're not even going to talk to you, okay? But we want to guide you over the next 3 to 4 years so you're set on a path that you should.
Right.
What's your take?
All right, so that's a great point about, we celebrate in America now home run entrepreneurship. So lottery winners, basically. So we celebrate Mark Zuckerberg, right? We celebrate, which are so unbelievably rare that happens, yet it's so ubiquitously talked about. It's like this kid in his dorm room, he came up with a way basically measure whether girls are hot or not online. It turned into Facebook. That's what it originally was. And Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg's worth, I think, $23 billion today. And then there's about 1,000 people that work at Facebook that are millionaires. But there are 317 million people in America, and there's not that many kids that are ever going to ever even work for a Facebook. I mean, these are moonshot, just absolute. They're really they're basically lottery winners, is what they are. And unfortunately, I think that it's so hopeless for a lot of kids. The cover of Forbes last month was called the Recession Generation. So this is something that we've talked about for a long time. Is that if you're 20 years old, 25 to 35, over the last 15 years, it's not been a great time to get out of college because the stock market's crashed twice, 50%. So you don't trust that. Not only do you not trust it, but you don't you hear your parents talking about how bad and terrible the stock market is. You see people getting laid off. You see, we've had 2 major recessions, and then we know for a fact that Social Security, the trust fund itself, is going to run down to zero. I mean, they tell you that every time you get one of those green statements. By the way, you don't get a green statement anymore. Did anybody notice that? You know why? It's online. You have to go online, just so you know. So there's a confluence of factors that make it so that it does seem kind of hopeless if you're 22 and it's taking you a year to get a job, even if you have a college degree. However, I think that our message is, and then the other point you make is that, and this is, again, I've noticed in our industry that unless you have at least $1 million, you really do not want to be with a big brokerage firm at all. So, and even that, at that point, a lot of firms have $2 million minimums and $5 million minimums. And all they've done is up those minimums as the market's gotten better and better. Average client portfolio goes up. They don't want to take anything below $1 million. So there's also this dearth of financial advice out there too. It's like, well, you can get financial advice if you're already rich, but what are you going to do if you're 25 or 35 for that matter, or 45? Well, and I can tell you a lot of our clients didn't. And I know examples of in this room that until you were 50. You didn't really start to sock it away. And now you're 65 and it's been a great 15 years and now you can retire. But most of them, my generation, let's say, is pretty pessimistic about it. And our answer, and there's a movement in financial planning that is they're actually called robo-advisor firms. And those are firms that do investing more either on a more model basis or a more algorithm. Some companies do it on algorithm, or they're just leveraging technology to bring the cost down so that investors with 50 grand or 60,000 or 100,000 can get actual advice and get actual guidance. The delivery mechanism, though, I think is getting more and more streamlined. And that's what Wella is. And I mentioned our company, Wella Strategies. We're relaunching that website starting January of 2015. The entire thought behind Wella is smaller portfolios, a younger generation, and the model is that we want to truly give away as much financial advice as we can, not expecting anything in return, knowing that if we could become a resource for that generation, that at some point, at least a third of those people will actually want to come and be our client. And so that's the selfish side of it. We think it's a good business model for the next decade or 2 decades. But it's also for this generation, we just want to be a truly objective, trusted resource that gives away the information, knowing that if it's right and we do a good enough job, we'll financially benefit from it at some point. But that's exactly what Wella is. And it is meant to be delivered through an iPad, through an iPhone. And it is going to be an entirely new part of the financial industry in general. I remember back in the 90s thinking that if you talk to a stockbroker at Merrill Lynch, he thought that they were very scared of E-Trade. Remember E-Trade? Baby commercials? I want to go buy an island commercials? E-Trade did not put Merrill Lynch out of business. E-Trade grew into its own large industry, discount brokerage. Charles Schwab, Fidelity. It grew into a multi-trillion-dollar business. Wall Street is still a multi-trillion-dollar business. So it didn't take away from Merrill Lynch. It just grew into an entirely new industry. And that is, mark my words, is exactly what's going to happen over the next 20 years with robo-advisors at companies like Betterment, Wealthfront, LearnVest, Wella Strategies. Wella has been doing this as long or longer than anybody in this country. So the big Personal Capital is a company out in Silicon Valley that gets a lot of press because they've raised $50 million in venture capital funding. We do the exact same thing they do at Wella with a real human behind the models that we rebalance every quarter. We just didn't take $50 million in venture money and spend it on advertising. That's every company that is doing this that's well known now. They raised $30 to $50 million in VC money, and they probably took 3/4 of that money, and they're advertising heavily online, Facebook, Twitter, radio commercials, television commercials. They partner with bloggers to really talk about. We just haven't done that yet. We'll start really trying to get the word out about Wella starting in January of this year. So I think that generation will find advice. I think they're not going to find it through how maybe this audience did, where you thought, I'm going to go to Merrill Lynch and sit down with a stockbroker and get advice. That's over, in my opinion, especially for 20 to 40 somethings. Matt Reiner, do you have any comments on that? Matt does a huge part with Wella.
What we found as we started Wella, we've advanced Wella.
Come on up here, Matt, please.
I wasn't supposed to be talking. I would address it. What we found in terms of that question of how do you talk to the individuals and talk to the younger generation is it's not the same way that people come into our office today and sitting across the desk from us. You have to figure out a way to relate to them and talk to them in their own voice and meet them in their own journey. Everybody hears from their parents, and as parents, I think it's something that you guys can all learn. I'm not a parent that I know of yet, so I don't have kids to talk to about, is that you were told to save, save, save. That goes on deaf ears for our generation. They know that. You have to meet them in their stages of life and help them accomplish each goal that they have and explain to them why that's necessary instead of just save for retirement. Retirement to our generation is never, right? Buying a house, though, is 2 years away. How do you save to buy a house? How do you relate that to them? Is what you need to kind of progress into our generation. So what we have done at Wella is we have strived to figure out how to talk with our clientele and to talk to them in a relatable fashion. And that's actually created action by that generation. So I think it's a different way than you've all seen it, and it's a revolution that's starting to change that we're seeing. So
yeah, I think it's a great point. Yeah, so I guess that's a really great way to articulate what a really important question is that, well, our generation will probably be reached more as, let's help you solve a chain of goals that lead up to retirement at some point. So it's I know I want to buy a house, and we know that's not easy even for Ben Bernanke. Does anybody know this? You know that Ben Bernanke couldn't refinance his house? Can you imagine that? What do you do for a living? Well, Federal Reserve Chairman. It's going to be tough, Mr. Chairman. Oh, I'm sorry, you're the ex-chairman? No longer employed, okay. The Brookings Institute, what do you guys do, right? You do work for a think tank? What's a think tank? So if Ben Bernanke's having trouble, so is your 25-year-old son or your nephew or whoever it is. So if we can meet them, what Matthew's saying here is if we can meet them and help them with that goal, and then when you start to have kids and that's scary, and you meet them with that goal, and then you help them simultaneously think about how do you pay for private school, forget college, and then college, there's just this huge continuum of things that need to be figured out for our generation that I don't think they want to go talk to some stockbroker at Merrill Lynch. I just don't think that Matt's generation will do that. So that's what Well is for. We'll see if it works. I sure hope it does. We're betting a lot on that. They're spending a lot of time. A couple more, and then we'll let everybody get a book, get out of here. So it's 5:45. So,
what do you forecast in the near future to be the status of all of our investments and
that's easy. That's easy. I would say there will be volatility to some extent. I guarantee you that. I think we've gotten back to a more normalized market. I mean, it's just not the way this past year. 2013 is a gift, and then 2014 up until the last month or 2 months, it's not supposed to be like that, right? So we can't every day the market goes up, 3 points or down 3 points, and you have this teeny tiny volatility, and bonds continue to make everybody money, and just everything working. Just doesn't work that way. It's just not supposed to work that way. And what we've entered back into is I think we're just normalizing the investment climate and the environment. Markets go up. It looks like a huge percentage points now that the Dow's around 17,000. Today's 200-point drop was really yesterday's 80-point drop. Or back when in 2009, it's equivalent of a 50 or 60-point drop. It's just the law of large numbers make people a little more nervous. You keep hearing about a correction and how terrible this market is. The market is down. Well, actually, not even today. Now that the market was up 250 points today, less than 4% from the high. And the entire world is shuddering about how terrible this is. Just remember, we were down 47% in 2007, 8, and 9. So we're just getting back to normal volatility. And I would think that, I don't think that there's much of a forecast here, but we tend to get lulled to sleep by what just happened over the last 6 months. And that's just not going to continue. We'll go back to a stock market that's up or down 200 points. Isn't that abnormal? But that's still only 1%. And that's a normal day. So bank on that. The other thing is that we really do have the fundamental underpinnings of our economy, at least in the U.S., are not bad. They really are not bad. I think we're always nervous about them because we're scarred by the last 15 years in this economy, and we have like head trauma. And we're always waiting for a shoe to drop. But the reality is that there are actually very solid underpinnings on our economy. And then the other thought, and this could be a negative to some extent, their Federal Reserve is right here, with this large trapeze net underneath this economy. And that's part of the reason the market was up so big today. It's the same message that it's funny that the market was up on this news because it's the same thing over and over again. They just talked about today with the Fed minutes that we're not going to raise rate. We're going to be very careful about slowing global growth. Europe, China slows. Well, that might impact us, so we're going to no rush to raise interest rates. So we've got this Fed who's right here still coddling the economy and waiting to be stimulative if it needs it again. So you can at some point argue that that's going to be an issue, but for the next 6 months to a year, could we have a correction of 10%? In the next month or two? Absolutely. But there's a 15 to 20% emotional premium on this market in either direction at any time. So I guess my answer is that I have lots of confidence that the stock side of the market will have a very good 5 years from now. A very good 5 years from now. I think the bond market, it's going to have a much more difficult period of time. Doesn't mean you don't make some money. It's just not going to be. It's not going to be a 6% rate of return on average in the bond side of your portfolio over the next 5 years. So that's my forecast. Higher volatility, decent stock returns, much more muted bond returns over the next 5 years. Classic escape of saying let's go back to 5 years, not the next 3 years. Why don't we get books? I'm going to be out. Okay, so thank you very much. We're going to do. If you need a book, I'm going to be out here. We've got plenty to give away for families. I'd love to say hi and thank you so much.